Hey everybody, welcome to V Radio. Hope you guys enjoyed my intro. I know it's a little long. It's just to give people time to join the stream as well as to give me time to share the link everywhere. Please like and subscribe and ring the bell if you have not done already. And please share this stream anywhere you think people may like it. The algorithm is not very nice to me. I basically only get new subscribers now if I'm on someone else's channel. And I don't know how often I pop up, but I get lots of notifications from you guys on a regular basis that you have somehow become unsubscribed or you're not getting notifications or whatever it is. Please make sure you go to hy.page/vradio, written as you see in the upper right-hand corner there, so that you can check out all my other mediums. They're there for redundancy. I'm on Rumble. I'm on BitChute. I'm on Odyssey. I'm also on Spotify and several other podcast outlets. Not all of my shows are on podcast, obviously, but Spotify accepts video there. But I am on Rumble. It's Mike. I am on Rumble. I'm on Rumble and I'm on Odyssey. If you go to hy.page/vradio, you can subscribe there if you want to go to Rumble. I don't live broadcast there because Rumble basically re-uploads everything directly from my channel over there, so we would end up with 2 copies of everything. And for some reason, Rumble doesn't let you delete videos. Anyway, but I'm on Odyssey and I'm on Rumble. Live, I'm only on Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube simultaneously. So, in any case, thanks for tuning in, guys. If you want to support my channel, obviously, you can do that also by going to hy.page/vradio. Or super chats are enabled. So if you have any questions for my guest today, drop me a super chat. I would very much appreciate it. I'm a disabled guy working from my bed, so it's been proving to be rather difficult lately. It's one of the reasons why there's been somewhat less content, because I just haven't had time. So in any case, my guest today wants to be referred to as Gray Ghost. That's his handle. He worked for CNN for many years, and we're going to be discussing the mainstream media and what his experiences with the mainstream media were when he worked for them. So join us today in this conversation, and if you have questions for me or the guest, drop a super chat. If I see one that I really, really like, I'll pull it up from just regular chat, but in any case, I'm always going to give priority, obviously, to people who donate just because they deserve it. So, in any case, I'm going to bring on my guest. Hello there, Mr. Ghost.
Hello there, fellow humans.
So, obviously, what I usually ask people, with obviously being mindful of brevity and focus, but like, if you can just kind of give them a little background on specifically, like, what got you to go from being, okay, I'm part of this media thing, to maybe not, and generally that question is kind of like framed usually with a, hey, how did you become an activist kind of thing? Like, if there was a moment in your life specifically, like any precipice moment where you're like, fuck this shit, I'm out. And real quick, super chat.
Yeah.
Hey there.
Okay.
We got a question right here. So after you answer my question, we'll go to the first question from the audience.
Okay, 10-4. They were just lying to people. And, if you're in the machinery at the very beginning and you see it happening in front of you, and you take that information and hand it either via video, which is what I did, to the people that were going to go through the editing process and get the talking heads notes and everything else, and then put it on broadcast to the masses, it wasn't what happened in front of me. That's where I turned. And it's nothing real specific other than the fact that I kept seeing this thread through everything I saw right in front of me live. Then when I get back to the house and look at it on television, just out of morbid curiosity, and go, and that was more of a critique of what I was, how I was shooting it. Did I have the right angle? Did I get, the content in there? I mean, I could see it on my own view screen. and I could see it in an editing bay, but I always wanted to see it on air. And then I started realizing, wait a minute, I was just there 2 hours ago, and that's not what happened. And there was no way to relay that back up the chain to go, hey, wait a minute. They just look at it, shut up. All you're going to do is point a camera.
So
And
basically,
that's
you just got to a point where I know you described a couple of instances, like where you're overseas or something, and you went through all the trouble to get all the notes together to have a really good take on what was taking place, and what ended up on the screen was not what you filmed, or at least not the story with the full context.
correct. And not being a journalist, which is a loose phrase for what they got now. Um, I wasn't a journalist. I was just an observer. And any human that sees something happen in front of them, and they take that information and hand it to the next person, it's like a warped version of telephone, the game telephone.
Right.
And you scratch your head and go, wait a minute, okay. And the masses are seeing this, and this is in the '80s, early '80s, where cable was becoming a thing, and CNN was a fledgling. He's the one that started it. Turner's the one that said, "Hey, I got this idea. Let's do a 24-hour news channel." Well, right there's a problem. So what do you do to fill up that 24 hours? And so to me, it seemed like they were in the beginning they were good. We fell on our face technically all the time, and they got another communications expert with the satellites and the camera guys and everything else to kind of show us how it's done. And but the process was where I had the problem with it. We'd send this stuff back via satellite to Atlanta, and like I said before, some 22-year-old snot-nosed producer with a liberal arts degree in underwater basket weaving decided they didn't like that way that made that feel, and they changed it around. But they were also getting their direction from the people above them, the producers of that segment, the management of Atlanta. So it was just this big, ugly, nasty. Well, let me rephrase that. It was just odd. It was very uncomfortable because they weren't telling the truth, and I wasn't raised that way. People I hung around with weren't that way.
Well, and
So that's
journalists didn't used to be that way either.
right.
you
None
know,
of us did. None of us did. But
right.
it was just, it's like it feeds on itself. And if you look at it from a 60,000-foot view, and you see something start, my boss taught me this trick a long time ago when I first stood behind a camera. He said, "Remember, the first 15 minutes is where the truth is. The rest of it's all bullshit."
So with that, I'm going to bring up our first super chat from Changebox. How much of what is being broadcast is true, but only half true?
That's a good question. If you wanted to go from a scale from 1 to 100, about a tenth of it is the truth. The rest of it is all everybody else's opinions. It's the spin. It's what they want you. It's how they feel. All right. I'm not here to watch the news to figure out or to to absorb how the anchor feels. I could care less. It's just like actors. I want to pay to watch your movies. I don't give a damn what you do, and don't tell me how to live. Same thing with with the news media people actually on the screen, the talking heads.
Right.
There are opinion shows, there are this, that. But to get back to your question, I'd say about a tenth of it. Because then again, where is that information coming from to the talking head on the screen? It's got to go through a process, and then that process is where it happens. So the only way you're going to know what the truth is if you're standing there, and that's the downfall of this media because
So
nobody believes them.
very, very little of it really is what you're
Right,
saying.
very little, very little.
Right.
I mean, there are some different things and that'll pop out. If you see the video doesn't lie, okay, unless you edit it. And if you're human with two eyes in your head, you can see the edit. It's not that hard.
Right.
But video doesn't lie, and it always got me. Like today, what's going on? they'll stick them. Somebody get on a podcast or on TV or one of these media platforms and go, especially politicians. Oh, I never said that. And you go back into your little library and go, yeah, you did. It's on
Right.
video. Here it is, and you throw it out there, and people like YouTube and everybody else, Twitter, the whole nine yards. They go, oh no, that's disinformation. Bullshit. It's what he
So,
said.
right, we had a follow up from Changebox. Do the talking heads even know what they are saying, or are they busy trying to look good and not make mistakes? Do they share
No,
your opinion of the news?
um, yeah, they want to look good. Okay, that's just normal. That's human thing. Yeah, I'm going to be sitting in front of a bazillion people, but it's mostly their opinion, and you can tell by watching them, where they're going because I love it when an anchor gets pissed because then you know exactly where they stand. Okay, even though that's not their job. There's an old 50s television show, um, Dragnet, and it's facts, man, nothing but the facts. That's all I want out of a media broadcast. So everybody, especially today, in the '80s, it was kind of the same way, but everybody wanted to be, I'm important. I'm the one giving you the news. I will tell you what you need to hear. That's where I got a problem with it. It's like, wait a minute, no, just comment. If you want to commentate, make sure people know that this is your opinion before you throw it out there straight faced saying this is the fact. There's a big difference. So hopefully that answers their question. And
It
yeah, they
reminds
do.
me, like, there was actually a documentary, and I'll look up the name of it at some point, probably during the broadcast, but it was literally somebody had gathered up that there were these, like, apparently on some of the cable channels, there was a way that you could tune in so that you would not see the commercials. So you would just have a feed of what was going on in the newsroom.
Yeah, that's the
And
old days. Yeah.
right, so you could still watch what was going on. And so these people, when they don't think they're being watched or listened to, would say all kinds of stuff.
Oh yes.
Like, I remember one of them in particular, like, this guy was being interviewed and he was getting tough questions, and whoever was working on his makeup said to him, well, use this strategy. So, like, if somebody
hmm
asks you a question you don't really want to answer, repeat the question to make it look like you went ahead and listened, and then go on talking about whatever you want. So, like, if you asked me, well, what about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq? Then my response, if I don't want to talk about that, is going to be weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Yeah, thank you very much for that question. That's a very important question. And now I'm not going to talk about it at all, or I'm going to
right.
find
Let me
some
get
way to
back to
deflect it.
whatever.
Right. And
Right.
that
And
makes it
you're getting
sound like
your
you answered it, even if you didn't.
right. And who did you get that advice from? The makeup artist.
Right.
Hello. They're
Right.
so in their own. Everybody's in their own bubble in that business, and it's, yeah, they're cute, and they've got opinions, and everybody should. If you're a good human, you're a good human, period. If you're not a good human, get the hell off the planet. We got better things to do. Stop sucking up all our air. And you can tell you can feel those people in your orbit. And but that's just a phrase I use. And it took me into my 60s, my early 60s, which I am now, to realize that that's not a bad way to look at things. If you got people in your orbit that are toxic or giving you false information or anything else, you as a human with a brain and have a little bit of life experience on you and some hair somewhere on your body that makes you a little bit older, did you realize that what's coming out is not your spider senses go off? You're like,
Right.
wait a minute, something's fuzzy here, and I'm always one of these guys. It helps in my business, but I'm one of these guys that I look at a piece of technology I'm working on, and it's mechanical and everything else, and my attitude is, okay, the customer tells me this is broke, so I go, okay, so. And most guys or most people will go, let's fix that problem. Okay, but what caused that problem? Everything else in here on this piece of equipment that I'm dealing with, that these people are actually living in, and it's mobile, and it's like a house that goes through a constant 6.8 earthquake every time you move it, something's going to rattle loose. But why? So I want to go back and get that initial oops, get that fixed so I know it doesn't cascade down the line. And that's the way I think news should be at. We don't want your opinion. Okay, I could care less. What I want to know is what happened.
Right.
Does it affect people I know? The first thing you think of as a human is my immediate family. Okay, asteroids come and hit the planet. I got people on the other side of the country, and it's gone.
Right.
Are they okay? That's the first thing you think as a human. And then, as a thinking human and somebody who wants to critically think, or should critically think, is to step back and go, why did this happen? Where is the truth? And unfortunately, with media today, and I blame Mr. Turner for every bit of this, yeah, in a sense that he's the one that came up with the idea and actually put it into practice, as shaky as it was at first. But look where it started, look at where its peak was, and look where it's at now. And so there were some good things in there in that process, but now it's just a giant cluster screw. It's everybody's opinion, which is what we should be able to do, but not be so polarized that if I don't like the color blue, or I walk outside, God, pretty blue, you're racist. What? What are you? Okay, and that's, I think, part of the thing that the media does is they get something like that, and they throw, well, the people, they get their news off the internet, if that makes sense. They
Mm-hmm.
get their news off of Twitter. That's why this is one of the reasons Elon Musk scares the living hell out of everybody that's in the media, in our power structure, the elites, because he's just, and this is no endorsement of, I like him. I think he's batshit crazy, but I like him because he's brave enough to step out. And this is not saying that I endorse everything he does or anything like that. It's not an endorsement for him. I just like him as a human because those are the kind of people I hang out with.
Right.
Those are the kind of people that think outside the box, and they're not lemmings. There's the word I was looking for. They're
I did
not
a
lemmings.
I did a whole video about them panicking about Elon Musk acquiring Twitter, and I think the other thing is they definitely didn't want us to know how many of the Twitter people were bots, and it's because um, I found out. The funny thing is the mainstream media reported on this. The mainstream media
Mm-hmm.
reported that the military was developing software for the purpose of creating armies of fake accounts for the
Yep.
purpose of swaying public opinion.
Yep.
So ABC reported on that. It's not like you got to go to InfoWars to read that. And that was funny thing
Right.
is that it just came out again. Like that the military did that. I'm like, well, Jesus, I reported on that way back, and it's like I'm glad you guys are finally on board, but of course the government would say, well, don't worry because we only use this in foreign countries. I'm like, yeah, sure you do. Um,
Uh-huh.
but
If
but
they
the
can use it on
besides,
them and throw it on us, then and that's what people don't get. And you're going down that right road. The track you're following is correct.
right,
Just as from an outsider who does not have a media presence, I can barely run my smartphone, but I'm not stupid.
right,
Like I told you before, I look at everything from a 60,000 foot view, and I'm going. I see these trends, and it's just something weird about the way I think. And I see these trends, I go, wait a minute. Okay, if the government can make something that disrupt another government, either voting wise, financially, militarily, what the hell do you think you're safe from that? Because people in power, media, and it's the media thing again. They're going to throw it out there as trial balloons, and they're going to see what sticks. And ooh, we're looking on Twitter, and look how many followers you got on this phrase, and that's what they're going to go with. So they try to hide all this stuff. In the meantime, they're watching everything you do, and then they
so
report on it. You're right.
question from the audience. This is from Tam, who's one of my longtime moderators. Have you seen the movie Wag the Dog?
Yes.
And if you have, how close to reality was that movie as far as reporting on wars?
As far as reporting on wars, it's pretty close. It's all narrative. It's all information. Who controls the information is the one that wins. That's
And
and that's the best way I can put it. So yes, that movie, I kind of sat back and went, You know, I kind of relate to the guy in Jurassic Park, the cameraman or the reporter, because he's just running around like a nut trying to get everything he can on video. But it's the reporter, it's the editing staff, and I'm not saying everybody's biased, but they get these marching orders from up top. Look, this is the narrative we want, and they may not agree with it, but they want to keep their damn job. So if you've got a war going on, and they wanted to, Vietnam was a good example when they started doing that kind of thing. The information coming out of Vietnam, even World War II, the Korean conflict, any of that stuff, Walter Cronkite, you never knew he was a hard leftist. And because he didn't bring that out, he was to the point, didn't like the war. Towards the end of the Vietnam War, you saw more of his own opinion, but he would tell you, this is my opinion. He wouldn't tell you it was fact. This is what, just from the facts he had, this is my opinion. So, but he always gave you the facts. And that's kind of the thing that I don't think people in this day and age get a grasp on, because not everybody doing the information is a bad person. It's just they've let way too much of everybody's opinion come into, when you have, well, let's put it in boxes. I want to watch the news for the news. What happened in my town? What happened in my county? What happened in my state? Does it concern, like, get back to that point, does it concern my immediate family, friends, fellow human beings?
Right.
Okay. That's what you want. That's what I want. I'm sorry. That's what I want from a news organization. Okay. Just give me the facts. I'll make up my own opinion.
Right.
And then I can go different places, like somebody like you, or listen to another, cable outlet or something like that. And then I can go, okay, and then now it's my job in my head, for me personally, to figure out what's going on. Once I get that done, then I can form my own opinion about that. And I don't try to broadcast that. And if I do tell somebody something, like a friend or neighbor or whoever, I tell them, hey, look, this is just my opinion, but here's the facts first. This is going on, this is going on, this is going on, this is going on. And I'll look at them and go, okay, this is my opinion. What do you think?
That's definitely the formula that I follow here. And I do make it clear, though. I make the distinction. I make the announcement, so to speak. Like, okay, now we are switching to, this is my opinion about this, or
Correct.
this.
Yeah, so
and
you do it right.
Right. And it's just, and I make it clear to them, all right, and it's fine. That's the other thing is that I'm trying to do here is that I also need people to think it's okay for them to disagree with me about some
Correct.
things. And that's not something everybody does. Like, for example, I agree with a lot of things Ben Shapiro says. I disagree with a lot of things Ben Shapiro says, and I watch him because there are certain things we do agree about. I'd say the same thing about people like, say, Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, Tim Pool, so it's like I take what I want out of this, but we have kind of become conditioned that we don't want to listen to anybody that isn't just parroting exactly what we want to hear. And that's, I think some of it is by design. So let me go over my historical understanding of what I think got us here, and then you comment on what you think, given is that you were involved in it a lot longer. So my understanding is, first we start, at least with my timeline, with Reagan and the elimination of the fairness doctrine. And so then it's not necessary for them to equally represent two sides of an argument. So that's a major change. Then you move on to Bill Clinton. He deregulates how much of the media one person is allowed to own. Like, there used to be a time when I think it was like you could have 3 media outlets, and that's legally all you were allowed to own to one person. And the point of that law was supposed to be that you don't want one person scribbling notes, like, say, Rupert Murdoch with Fox, or I forget who owns MSNBC. But the point is you don't want one person just making their own media, for the entire country. And that was deregulated under Bill Clinton. So we're talking about a bipartisan thing here. It's like both the Democrats and the Republicans understood that it was in their best interest to be able to have more control. So then you come to, there was a, I guess, a landmark decision during a, they sued Fox News for something. It was like, I guess, reporting some kind of falsehood. And what the judge ruled was that Fox is not actually obligated to tell the truth.
Yes.
So now you have a perfect storm for not only is it now okay for me to be one-sided, not only is it now okay for one person, because this is my media, it's going to say what I want, to own the majority of the TV stations, radio stations, etc., or just very few people. And then on top of it, we don't have to tell you the truth anyway. So then that ended with what my understanding is a media that basically it's catered to a specific audience. They do focus groups or whatever to figure it out. Like, what is it these people want to hear? And then they will then twist the news to fit that narrative. And that includes omitting certain facts that might make their viewership upset, but at the same time, making sure to twist certain facts to make them happy. And that's how you end up with why I always say, WWE Pro Wrestling, whether you prefer SmackDown or Raw, it's still all fake. So
yeah, exactly.
Go ahead.
You're going down the right path with that timeline, but I'm going to step back a little bit farther.
Sure.
The media, look what happened, and I wasn't around when this happened. I was born in '60, but look at what happened when McCarthy came out and started after. So this is a little bit of politics and media, but started in on communism. Okay,
Right.
and then he went after. He couldn't stand Hollywood because Hollywood wouldn't give him the time of day. When you've got a lot of Hollywood celebrities, and it was, for lack of a better term, a patriotic duty at that point for actors and actresses to sell war bonds. Okay, so that this is the time frame, and if the viewers are younger than I am, if they go back in their history, if it's even still there, to kind of watch and read about how McCarthy moved things around with the media in Hollywood, and then he got Hedda Harper, who was a Hollywood journalist, uh, um, entertainment journalist, for lack of a better term, and she could make or break careers by putting it in her column that so and so writer or so and so producer or so and so director was a communist, and their career just went poof, and they were gone. To me, what's happening now with cancel culture is the same thing, but on a huge scale. Does that make sense?
No, it does, and that's something I try to share with leftists right now. Is that they don't understand that there was a time when we had tribunals, and files on everyone, and if anybody whiffed like of the slightest hint of communism, then J. Edgar Hoover was like, putting stuff together to try to make sure they know whether or not you're going to turn communist any second. And then they would get people canceled. So like when the left becomes so comfortable all of a sudden with, well, it's okay to cancel people if we're doing it. It's okay to silence people if we're doing it. And some of the arguments that they make are so ridiculous. And it's like, for example, I've actually got a picture on my Twitter somewhere where, oh God, what's the guy? Robert Reich, who is, I guess he worked for Clinton. And so then he became a big progressive guy. And when they banned Trump from Twitter, he says, well, these are private companies. They can do whatever they want. That's not censorship. And then Elon Musk is about to buy Twitter. And then he goes, well, it's a corporate monopoly. We can't have that. I was like,
right. There's where I go back to that video.
You were all okay with, you were just fine with censoring as a private company when you thought the private company was woke, but now not anymore. I'm like, how about just no censorship? How about that?
Yeah.
And they don't. It's just I think part of the problem is that because I'm left leaning, I actually have a guy coming on tomorrow who wants to bitch me out for not bitching about the right enough, and I told him straight up, I'm like, Look, man, I tell the truth, and unfortunately for you, right now, and I say this as somebody who is a left-leaning independent, who leans left on most things. The left is fucking crazy right now. That's
Yeah,
just the
well, they're all
truth.
crazy. Don't
Right.
just pick the left. I
Well,
mean, the
no, and I'm
left is
not.
more vocal about
Right,
it.
but it just happens that it's at this moment anyway.
Yes,
And I
yes.
believe in cleaning up your own. Like that was something that I
Hmm.
remember saying. So like when Black Lives Matter protests turn violent, or things like that, when that stuff happens, they say, well, we don't all advocate for that. I'm like, well, that's great. So when are you going to call it out when it happens? And they don't.
Right.
They're never going to
Well,
say, well, you're right. We should call out any violent activists. They don't want to do that. Instead, they want to yell at you for bringing it up. Like, how dare
exactly.
you bring up that happened and tell the truth about it? I'm like, how dare you not tell them that it was wrong? When I was part of Occupy Detroit, Antifa would show up and break stuff during our peaceful marches, and then we would have to do, media to make sure that everybody knew that wasn't us and that we don't advocate that. When something like that
Right.
happens now, they don't do it. So, anyway, the reason I'm getting at this is that right now it just so happens that there's a lot of crazy stuff happening on the left, but in addition to that, I feel a responsibility to call it out when it happens, and a lot of these people don't. They would rather you just help them cover it up if their side is doing something wrong and not say anything about it, but to me that's complicit. You can't do that, so go ahead and
Right.
comment.
Well, it's the same. It goes back to being canceled.
Right.
Stop frigging apologizing. That's it. Black Lives Matter. eh, Uh, uh, I can't think of the guy's name now. Brain fart. But anyway, you know, and I'm not the one that came up with that phrase, but they were using it in the context of, if you don't agree with them, you're a racist. You don't agree with them, you're a climate denier. Blah 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 blah. But if you're in that clique, it's like this. It's like the brat kids in high school, right? And they're all they all think this. They monolithically think, and they're trying to get more and more because they're getting older and not going to be around a bunch. So they want this parasite to survive, and this is on both sides of of the aisle. Excuse me. So they they're trying to pull in the young, and you got to think like this: if you don't, this is what we're going to do to you, and they do it. If you disagree with them, you're everything. You're everything but a God's child, right? And
Right.
so to think to think that like when McCarthy did it, when they went after Howard Hughes, who was a nutball, but he was a brilliant nutball. They just when when people in power or quote unquote the elites or government start treating the masses as not slaves. I'm not going to use that. Conscripts was the word I
Right.
was looking for.
Or
Yeah,
serfs or
or serfs.
peasants.
Yeah, right. Peasants.
Right.
There you go. There's a good word for it. You are nothing but peasants. Gavin Newsom in the state of California. Here's a good example. Pushing the fact that we're all going to go green. Well, they can't keep the power on in California. That's why I've got a 35 kW to light up my property. And I want to see how fast that electric fire truck gets to his goddamn vineyard when it's on fire.
Right.
Because I'm going to be on the other end of the court, about 2 miles from their 2 miles from their destination. I'm going to pull the plug. And
So
it's that elitist attitude that because they have control now through social media, which I think is one of the biggest mistakes we ever made. The laws you spoke about, the Fairness Act, um, having more than three media branches for one owner, all that is they're using it from a 60,000 foot view now. They're using it to control the information. Whoever controls the information has the power. But the American public, because of, and this is the one silver lining in social media that I see, and remember, I'm not a social media guy, but from what my wife does with her social media and the things that she's involved with, you're starting to see a turn from the crazy left. All right, and I won't call them crazy. They actually believe this stuff, but they do not practice it. A good example, John Kerry. Oh, we got to stop all this carbon emissions, but the man flies around on a private jet because he's important.
Right.
Corey Bush, defund police, but I'm paying $160,000 a month, or what was it? Excuse me, I think it was like $30,000 to $40,000 a month for her private security because she's important. She needs to do this work. Who the hell are you? Is my attitude, right?
Right.
You're
That's like
just
Black
another
Lives Matter
human.
saying abolish the police, and then they have private security at their mansions.
Exactly. So I
So
mean, if you're right, so if the public and your audience, of thinking humans, and I'm putting everybody on the planet in this basket, via Hillary Clinton, but we all have a soul somewhere. We know what's right and wrong, but when your world gets invaded, and I'm going to use the United States as a test bed, when world, your personal world gets invaded by all this BS information, or this side wants you to do this, or the other side, the right side wants you to do this, and like I told you before in a free interview, I'm down the middle of the road guy.
right.
And the old man told me, he said, here's the crown of the road. Where's all the water go? All this shit goes to the sides. If you stay in the middle, you got a chance of surviving. You're not going to end up in a ditch. So that's kind of where we're at now. And I feel bad because I have a 22-year-old, and thank God I got one with a brain. you know,
Right.
and he didn't swallow. He couldn't. They had a hell of a time putting him in a box because he doesn't think the way they want him to.
Right.
And now his mother's a teacher. The whole side of that family's a teachers, and there are lots of good teachers. Um, and I saw how they tried to twist him, and then one of their fallback things is let's put him on medication. So that makes him more docile, so they can program him.
So
Well,
let me go ahead and finish that up, and then I want to take the next question.
no, go ahead, go ahead. That
So
that statement pretty much says itself.
sure, Changebox says, is the hatred between the networks real, or is that just to divide up the audience?
Well, they don't all hang out at the same cocktail parties, and if they do, nobody knows about it. And the hatred now, if you're talking, say, like, we'll use Fox as an example. Fox and MSNBC. Okay, use your own brain, and if I tell people if you could split screen it and put a plug in each ear and listen to them as they're going at the same story, yeah, they don't get along. Absolutely not. Have they kind of stay in their own bubble. So yeah, he's kind of going down the right road. They don't like each other, but as far as the left is concerned, they all go to the same cocktail parties. The odd ones out, or like Fox, maybe the upper echelon might go to the same cocktail party, but the working stiffs don't. And then when you get below the talking heads, the real people behind the scenes, the producers, the camera guy, they all kind of hang out at the same bar. So there's this weird disconnect. The far, you start out with this little nucleus of the people that actually, twist the wrench. Then it gets above them, and then those camps separate, and there's more on one side than the other, and they might throw, there might be one or two out of that 100 that are actually friends, but they don't tell anybody because they're going to get canceled or they're going to lose their job.
Right.
So when you put that kind of, I guess, when you put that kind of that level of intolerance in the equation, we're lucky we're not shooting each other in the streets right now. Well, they are, but I mean, you get where I'm going with that. That has no place in there. And I'm not
Right.
a religious person, but treat your brother as you would want to be treated.
Right.
And so I'm not going to immediately go out and say, like somebody like you, I'm not going to go out and just tear you down or your family down or dox you or anything else just because you didn't agree with what I said. That's the only way anything's ever going to get kind of figured out is the fact that you've got to have different opinions. And now we're getting away from the facts part of it. But if you've got the facts, okay, two people in a room, the world explodes. These two people see it happen at the same time.
Right.
That's the fact. The world's gone. Okay, now it's time. Now, if those two can go, okay, well, this is why I think it happened, and the other guy goes, no, this is why I think it happened. You can have an honest, intelligent conversation about this because you both seen the fact, and that's
Right.
where everything gets lost. That's why we're in the position we're in now. And
Like, what do you mean
emotion,
Kyle Rittenhouse didn't shoot black people?
exactly, exactly. So you've got you've got that dynamic. And I know it sounds like I'm trying to dumb it down, or I'm just some dumb hillbilly. But if people would take a breath and realize that the person that they don't like is a human too, as long as you don't invade my personal space, you got a chance of surviving, right?
And
But
that's
if I ask you into my personal space because you're having a problem, or you're in a bind, or you're in trouble, yeah, I mean, it's like a car wreck. You see somebody flip out in front of you, and I drive a mountain road every day, so I've seen some pretty hairy stuff in 40 years. The first reaction as a human is get out, make sure one, you're safe, nobody's going to run into you, and then run for help. It's like first responders. And who cares about the opinion at that time? I don't give a shit if you're what color you are. If you're on fire, I'm going to do, as a human, I'm going to do everything I can to pull your ass out. You may not survive it, but at least I tried. And I think
Well,
that's
I
what's
think that's part of
lacking.
it. We
That's the part that's
dehumanize
lacking.
people who don't agree with us. Like, it's not, like every
Yes.
now and then it's like you'll see it. Like, so to the extreme right, everybody to the left of them is a communist, and to the right, everybody, and to the left, everybody to the right of them is a freaking fascist, and there's nothing in the middle.
Right.
Like, and some of the stuff, like, when Rolling Stone did their article about the Buffalo shooter, they stated that the Buffalo shooter was not an extremist or a lone wolf, that he was a mainstream Republican, which was a flagrant lie.
Yeah.
If you read the guy's
Yeah.
manifesto, he described himself as an
Mm-hmm.
authoritarian communist who had been, or no, sorry, left authoritarian who had been studying communism since he was 12. Not exactly a mainstream Republican, but
Right.
they're desperate to push this narrative that, all white males are, and Republicans are secretly white supremacist fascists. So the guy was definitely a white supremacist. There's no question about that, but he was a left-leaning white supremacist. So, taking a comment
Right.
here from the chat, Sabrina says, she was actually talking to Changebox. I do not buy the same with politicians. I believe they want to divide and conquer with a splash of bullying. The more they divide us, the more power they have, just like cults. And I would definitely agree with
Yeah.
that. They need to divide
Yeah.
us up so that we never kind of look and realize, that the men behind the curtain are all sitting there eating steak and, doing
Exactly.
well, and
And
the
we're
rest of
eating
us are
grog and
fighting
living
from
in
the
a shack.
scraps. Right.
Right. No, she's absolutely right. And so now I know this is kind of odd, but I got a question for you.
Sure.
And you're younger than I am, and
Yep.
so your generation and the generations below me, I because I have a 22-year-old and my wife's 10 years younger than I am, I kind of get that feedback from their generations. And my question to you is, I mean, if it came from a reliable source, you could actually put it, almost in your hand. Would you have a problem with a media outlet that's all they did? They put that fact in your hand with the video, with the timestamp, no opinion, no nothing. There it is. Can
Well, of
somebody
course.
in your generation or lower down? Well, no. What I'm saying is, from your generation down, would they be able to focus on something like that? You're a rarity. You don't. You're not. There are people that I know that are younger than I am. There's no way they'd even think about that. No, we just get all our information from here. So, I mean, your generation, generationally speaking, if you drop something like that in their lap, would they be able to handle it?
Well, I'm from Generation X. I'm 46 years old, so it's not like I'm a spring chicken per se, but I think that because I have a lot of friends from the younger generations because of places that I've worked and because my hobby is usually inhabited by college kids, so I have kind of a grasp of what it is. I think the problem is now anybody who doesn't agree with me is misinformation or disinformation or fake news.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just encountered that because I always have like a pre-talk with people I'm going to discuss things with, especially if I'm going to debate with them. And this guy, I'm just listening to him grossly mischaracterize everything I say. Every link that I give him that proves the truth, he has some weird way of trying to wiggle around it. Like you can't, they become immune to facts that are outside their world.
Right.
And I'd say what's different is that my audience knows that I'm a Bernie voter. I didn't keep that secret from them. My audience knows that I still support most of his platform. I don't make agreeing with me about everything a requirement for interacting with me as a human being.
There you go.
Whereas now, because it's not just about, well, maybe we disagree on a few things. Now the political parties are being assigned, as if one of them is human and the other one is not. One of them
Right.
is authoritarian and evil, and the other one is not. There's no middle. Like there's no, and it's just like George Bush and if you're not with us, you're with the terrorists. And
Right.
unfortunately, that quote doesn't have as much power because these kids don't remember that, and all they know
Well,
is that George Bush is the nice Republican that says mean things about Trump. So I love that guy, and Liz Cheney's
uh-huh.
awesome. And I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
we don't
Exactly.
want them back. Trust me. You're
Their
going to think
bubble
it's
is
all
real
well and
small.
good until you're getting drafted and sent off to Iran because they want their
Correct.
oil.
Correct.
But so I want to take another point here from John Jackson, longtime conservative who listens to my show. He says, the WF wants regular people to eat bugs for the environment, but the elites at their meetings in Davos are eating steak, lobster, and caviar. And I would
Correct.
totally agree with that, John. And it kind of comes back to things that I've been saying to you guys for a long time was that one of the things that I just wanted the conservative right to hear me out about, and they have, is that they're starting to get the idea that they understand now that the super, super wealthy, and I don't mean like a mom and pop who own a store or something who are upper middle class. I mean
Global
the
elites.
the Jeff Bezos types who are
Yep.
insanely wealthy. So I'm so wealthy that I can play with model rockets that actually go into space and have people in them.
Yep.
Those kinds of people are actually not anybody's friend. And I think that for the longest
Right.
time, well, they're each other's friends. I think for the longest time, especially the ones who got sucked into free market capitalism to the point that it's almost like a religion to them, they think that, well, those are our supermen, those are our super ideal. And if we all just work hard enough, we too can be Jeff Bezos. And it's just not true. you
No.
know, it's not. And they've been told that, and then they believe that that means that those people are on their side, and they're starting to understand it. I did a whole video specifically explaining, it's literally called Conservatives. This is a warning from the Soviet era, and it was about
Yep.
the Russian KGB defector Yuri Bezmenov, who came over here to warn us that the conservatives play videos of Bezmenov all the time, because he does have a lot of warnings about communism trying to get into our country. But they usually don't also mention that Bezmenov has a quote, and I used it in the video, where he's like, the wealthy are going to sell the rope that they will be hung with. Like, if they can't get over their excessive obsession with profits with no concern whatsoever of the consequences and continue to like, sell the economy or do business with these huge communist countries. And he was referring to Russia, but to me, I look at that now and we sold our manufacturing to China.
Right.
And
And
now
that's
we're
been
trying
going
to,
on since the 60s.
right. And who did that? Well, it wasn't welfare moms,
Nope.
it wasn't all the people that the media tries to tell you is your problem, and
Nope.
it wasn't the people who vote Democrat in Detroit. They're not the reason why this happened. It's because bean counters, who like just don't care. Like, I remember because I have a relative, my grandmother used to own most of the orange groves in California. She was extraordinarily wealthy. And she was nice to me, but when I spent time around the people that she spent time around, you kind of get the feeling that after you reach a certain point of wealth, people who make under $100,000 a year, you don't necessarily say that they're not human, but there's definitely a classist feeling that gets so extreme that it's like,
Yep.
they're okay, you don't make as much money than me, you're not even really the same
Yep.
species as me. And they don't use those words, but God, if you try to date one of their daughters and you're, say,
Oh
I don't
God.
know, a tradesman or something, yeah, that ain't gonna fly.
No,
That's
you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, I kind of think I know who you're talking about as far as your family's concerned, because I've been in California a long time. Um, and but you're absolutely right. It's they get to a certain level, and everybody. I hate to use this phrase, and it's not it's not being racist. It's like treating the gardeners with disrespect. Okay, that guy is out there busting his ass in 120 degrees. Well, Nancy Pelosi did it. The reason we want these open borders, because so they can pick our crops. Okay, now how elitist is that? I mean, if you think about it, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. And she's third in line? Come on. You know, we all bust our ass to have a family. And they keep trying to pull us apart. Black Lives Matter, they don't want the nuclear family. How many uh, black children have been killed by abortion? None of that stuff. They don't want that out there, and it's their own race that's doing it to them. And then all of a sudden, you get these politicians, or I call them snowflakes. God, I love that term. But they all just jump on. We'll, there's a comedian out there, and I don't know if we can do a plug real quick, but
go ahead.
his name is Brad Williams. He's a little person, and he does a I don't know what episode it's on, but I saw it when it was live, and I just about came out of the seat, jumping up and down, screaming, yelling. Perfect. He said it. He has a little piece about how white people, and I'm critically Caucasian, how white people stand up for the black community, and they're like, the gist of it is, look, okay, look, we'll take care of this. You're not smart enough to do this. We'll deal, and the way he does it, it hits home with just a. And my 22-year-old is sitting next to me, and he just went, "Oh no way!" He just said that. Yep, that's what he said, and he's right. And the elites, they call it the global elites. Now, I first heard this term um, when I was running around the White House for CNN, and I heard people talking about the global elite and New World Order. That was the one that got me.
Right.
And I went, wait a minute, what the hell is New World Order? So immediately I'm on the hard line calling my dad, going, okay, old brilliant one, what the hell does that mean? And he started to tell me what his life experience was, and how the Middle East and money and all these global elites, they got more money than God. They don't really have any. You're right. They don't really have any friends. Okay, Bill Gates. Who'd want to be friends with that moron?
Just
I
people who
mean,
wanted to be near his money, really.
exactly. There it is. They don't
And
care
that's
about him.
also why they're frequently drug addicts or alcoholics, and
Yep.
they're often miserable too.
Yep.
And it's actually, there was a documentary, and I forget the name of it, but there's this guy who's a former billionaire who literally gave away a lot of his money, And the reason why is he realized that he had alienated his family. He had to spend any
Mm-hmm.
time with his kids. None of them wanted to
Yep.
talk to him now. And then he discussed it, and he said it's like being an addict, because
Mm-hmm.
you keep thinking, well, maybe if I just get another billion, then
Yep.
everything will be fine. And then it just never ends. Like, because it's just never ending commitment to acquisition, regardless of whether or not it's beneficial to anyone else, obviously, or even if it's detrimental. And
Right.
that's the side of capitalism that people don't talk about, because I think they're fixated on, like, again, they don't realize that it has to be fettered. Like, so even Jordan Peterson, for example, says you can't just let it go crazy, you know.
Right.
And even like, so like when the anarcho-capitalists talk to me about free market stuff, I'm like, because they don't think there should even be any government. They think everything should be money and corporations. And I was like,
Right.
well, you guys like Ludwig von Mises and you like Ayn Rand. You know what they both had in common? They both think anarchists are idiots.
Yeah.
But the big point that I was trying to get at was just that it's necessary for us to recognize, first of all, when you bring up the New World Order or whatever, George Carlin did a bit that I
Yep.
used when I was responding to um, Sitch and Adam, which is another show I go on sometimes, and they debated me a bit about the Iraq War.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to a point where, okay, so it's wrong to think everything is a conspiracy theory. That's fine, but it's also wrong to assume that everything is not a conspiracy theory. And the notion that, like, as Carlin pointed out, he's like, you get called a kook, or kook, that's a word, whatever. It doesn't, like, the idea that it's preposterous that wealthy people might ever get together and have a plan. No, it doesn't happen. You're a kook. You're a conspiracy buff. He actually
Right.
said they don't even have to have formal meetings. But like, of the stuff that Alex Jones, for example, talks about, we know what the Bilderberg Group is.
Yep.
Like, we don't know what goes on, but we know who goes. So we're
Yep.
supposed to believe that all those elite people just got together and hung out and watched horror movies and ate popcorn. Like, you
They're
think that's what
planning
they were
your
doing?
future.
Right, exactly. And they're going to have their own best interests at heart, just like any other
Mm-hmm.
large group of people do. And I want to acknowledge, thank you, Steel Stargazer, $50 super chat. Thank you for the stream. More like it. And was another one on here. Somebody pointed out, 1 second, because he called me out specifically. I just want to thank him. It was Stephen N. actually said that a lot of these people that are on MSNBC who are pushing the anti-white vibe are literally married to white people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Don Lemon. Look, there you go.
Right, so they're grifting so hard about it because, and like we said before we talked here, it was Don Lemon is basically just the Joy Reid of CNN. And we're going to talk a little bit today about how CNN is trying to rebrand. But I want to go down and make sure I've looked at everything good on the, here as far as the comments. But did you have any comment on just how the racial, like, hot bud thing seems to just be another thing for them to get people to tune in for?
It's what's the old saying? If it bleeds, it leads. Okay. Are you going to take a car accident over? This is how a news an assignment desk thinks. Are you going to take the white fluffy puppy story? Look, this dog has 13 puppies. Or are you going to go, there's a hell of an accident on a 405 freeway, lots of bodies. That's what they're going to go with. I know it's kind of blunt, but that's it. I mean, if it bleeds, it leads.
Right.
And when
Anything
it
that they
comes to
can
the
get
rate,
money for.
right, exactly. News organizations do not survive on their brilliance. It doesn't happen. Social
Well, and like,
media, none
the
of
other
these.
thing I pointed out, and I've shared this on Twitter before, but I made a meme because there was uh, basically a panel discussing Kyle Rittenhouse, and it was an
Right.
all-black panel, and Joy Reid, of course, was leading it, and then that guy, there was a professor, his really crazy-looking hair, and Jesus, he's one of the most racist
Oh
people
yeah,
I've ever seen on
yeah.
TV. And then, like, so I was like, these people are all talking about their struggle. I wonder what their net worths are. So I literally went down the line, and the only one among them who wasn't a multi-millionaire was Al Sharpton, who for some reason his his value is only like 500,000, and I think it's because of all the lawsuits that he's went through over the years. But
Exactly.
but yeah, the people who are grifting the struggle and the plight of the black person all live in gated communities with
Mm-hmm.
private security and
Mm-hmm.
probably never set foot into one of those ghettos a day in their life, other than maybe for an occasional photo shoot or whatever to make it look like they're in touch.
Police
You know,
involved shooting.
right. I'd be curious to know, like, for example, how much Don Lemon makes. He wasn't on that panel because he's on a different station. But yeah, it's like, and that's why for me, as a poor white trash kid who grew up in the ghetto, I look at people like that and just roll my eyes like, you don't know shit. Like,
Exactly. See, that's why that's why I like talking with you. Even though we met what an hour and a half ago, it's very easy to talk to somebody like you because you have a brain,
well, thank
okay,
you.
and you have good opinions. You have your facts, okay, and you're not you're not coming. Okay, take Joey Reid. Here's another example. Take Joey Reid and all these people. Who the hell wakes up every? How miserable do you have to wake up every morning and go, "How am I going to screw the other guy?" That's what elitists do because they have no friends. This is why the race thing is such a thing because now they have a voice. They're important. It's about them. I'm telling you, these other people are racist. And I'm like, okay. And so you're telling me that all white people are white supremacists. Okay. Keep pushing me that way, and I'm going to show you white supremacy.
Well, and it almost seems like that's what they want. And
That's
they
what they
need
want.
it,
They want us
really.
to twitch.
They needed to
And
exist. Like that's why when I did my documentary cataloging and comparing January 6th to all of the riots of 2020, because if you
right.
follow the media, apparently the only riot that happened was January 6th. Not the whole five. What was it, like 600 plus of them, I believe, and that's like an actual number. I have
Right.
one of my memes literally shows where they all were, but the riots that were that were designated that way, and they always say whataboutism. I'm like, no, your obsession with January 6th is the whataboutism. We've already been burning stuff
Mm-hmm.
down and attacking federal buildings all year. But the
Right.
point is that they really, really needed that to be a white supremacist, racist rally, so that they could have evidence of their boogeyman, because the white supremacist male is the new weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. It's the new terrorist. And there just isn't
Right.
enough evidence that it's that big of a problem. It is a problem. I'm not saying they don't exist, but there's a moment in particular during January 6th in the tunnel is what I call it. There's that tunnel that you go down when you're getting inaugurated. And I guess there was a huge fight there. It went on, at least the video I had went on for like 35 minutes, and it looked like a medieval siege where people were like literally hitting each other with sticks, and they had shields up and they're spraying each other down.
Right.
And this of course spits in the narrative that supposedly the cops just let them in, because I assure you the ones in that tunnel weren't, and a lot of them got seriously hurt. But my point is just to say that there was a moment where there was a black Trump supporter who somehow got knocked out. And so his fellow Trump supporters pick him up and with great care, carefully move him away so that he doesn't get further hurt. I'm like,
Right.
man, that's a real white supremacist crowd right there, isn't it? You see how fucking
Exactly.
racist they are?
Exactly.
I'm
And
like, if they were no white supremacists, they just stepped on him and walked past him. Like, you know,
well, that's what bothers me the most about when the media and the elites, the people with money, are pushing. Uh, they think the black community is a monolith. They're not.
right.
Okay, they're not. They're human beings. Everybody's got their own struggles, just like every other color on the planet. If you look around, we're a lot better off than most third world countries. But if we keep going the way we're going, we're going to be a third world country. And
So,
and then you get real tribal, is the phrase they're using now. They're
right.
getting real tribal. There's more people like you, myself, friends. There are more people in the middle going, wait a minute, and they're starting. The left, the left is starting to see. I mean, the hardcore. You know, if it's not the left way, it's the wrong way. It's like, okay, one, why am I giving you oxygen or giving you my attention if you're going to think that way? And
Right.
two, are you worth as a human being, saving or not saving, let me rephrase that, informing and giving the right information so you can make up your own mind and get rid of that negativity, because it's all bad juju. It really is, and it's on both sides. And when you start throwing massive blocks of humans of one color against another, what the hell do you think's going to happen? And they're
Right.
getting it from their own leaders. I mean, Martin Luther King, he had a dream, but he got taken out by people in higher office because he was that monolith. They needed that monolith to vote Democratic. And so they took his ass out. Same with Kennedy.
Right.
And I'm not a conspiracy theorist or anything else. And you can't tell me Lee Harvey Oswald is that good of a shot. It ain't flying, period. There's too many bodies buried, and we'll never find out. Maybe in your lifetime you will, but in my lifetime, I doubt they'll let it come out. And if it comes out, it's going to be heavily redacted. But those gentlemen, those leaders, they actually were leaders. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, he had an axe to grind. And so the difference between, like, say, a Malcolm X, and a Martin Luther King, they could disagree on things, and they did, but they didn't hate each other. Okay, they didn't. They were all for the black community, to bring the black community up, because they were getting treated like crap.
Well, the funny
Because
thing
we were
about
going through
that,
that growing process as a country to go, hey, wait a minute, this is not right. It doesn't matter what color you are, but the elites, the government, or the politicians, and people that were in their own communities, after those people were gone, they saw. Well, I'll use that Al Sharpton as an example. What's he do? They use that phrase race baiter. I don't think that's the right word for somebody like him, or a Joy Reid, or a Don Lemon. I don't. Propagandist comes to mind. Um, just really crappy human beings. I
well,
don't live
and
with
the
them. I don't
grifters, I
know them.
think that he
Right.
literally, his whole shtick is I make money on making people angry about race.
And there's where that money thing comes in again.
So let me
You know,
pull up a couple of these. So guys, if you ever want to talk to me about why I voted for Bernie and why I probably would again if he ran again, by all means come to Discord and we'll discuss it. I'm totally
that'd be
open to
fun.
that. Just let me know. It's not something that I generally talk about very much on the stream because I don't do a lot of right versus left.
Right.
But there is a video on here where I explain why I supported him and what my views are. If you guys go through my list, but so Logos42 says capitalism isn't a religion. It is the only idea that we have produced that has yielded the best results. Command economy does not work. Sure, capitalism has its issues. And I guess I'll delve into this a little bit since I talked about capitalism earlier, but
Mm-hmm.
there are people who, in my opinion, religiously feel that if capitalism is simply left unchecked, that the market forces will solve everything. And that's where you start to run into a point where the invisible hand goes from being a rational concept to almost being something metaphysical. Like they're never going to admit it, but the reality is that unfortunately you can only use greed as a motivation for your economy for so long, and if it's left unchecked, it can become too dangerous, just like anything else. And that's why I say, like when I had Lynn Wood on my show once, I said, if communism goes bad, you end up with a small group of people doing the least amount of work, making most of the decisions, and living better than everyone else. If capitalism goes bad, you have a small group of people doing
Yep.
the least amount of work, living the best, and doing better than everyone else. They both end up leading to the same thing if they become corrupt and then are just let go. Communism, in my experience, only works generally in very small groups where everybody is invested in the group. And the other part about it that is kind of important is that if it's going to work, like in small commune, it's not a situation where you're sitting around and collecting checks. It's a
Right.
situation where it's like we have now decided that we are going to live together. So now we're going to plant crops together. We're going to manufacture our goods together. And if we don't have anything, then we will make a product and we will trade with the outside about, perhaps for things that we need. And that's where a lot of kids run into trouble when they're trying to make communes, is they don't recognize, oh man, planting my own broccoli is not so easy.
Yeah.
That's where you run into a problem. But so in any case, let me move down here because we had a super chat. I want to pull it up. Once again from Changebox. What would a news organization run by Grey Ghost look like? Just some thoughts about the differences between the current state of things and his vision.
I don't know if I'd call it a vision. Um, I'm not that talented, but in this context, you'd have to have a base of who you are. Okay, are you, your opinion doesn't come into it, but as a human, what is your base? And from that point, you build. The knowing I think one of the golden rules would be one of the first golden rules is truth and truth only. I don't care how nasty the video is. I don't care who shot who. Excuse me. I don't. I want the truth, and it's going to be brutal. And then be very, very distinctive in the fact that if the talking head or say the people that were my anchors, my news team, none of their opinions come into it until it's part of the editorial page. But it better be factual, because if somebody was on my staff and that was our mantra, it's the truth, nothing but the truth, no matter how nasty it is, and without demeaning other humans, and throw that caveat in there, as humans, but to that's my core. So if somebody goes into the opinion page and says this is their attitude, this is their opinion, fine. But then they start skewing the facts. So the research has got to be done before that process can go out and everybody knows it's opinion. But if somebody on my staff went out and did an opinion piece, representing our quote unquote news organization, and they get one warning. That's it. I don't care what HR says. I don't care if they're black or they're white. If you're going to lie to your quote unquote customers, which are all these people taking this information in via the internet or cable TV, broadcast TV, whatever, if you're going to do that, you're not on my staff. And we're not going to be able to fill up 24 hours. There's where I go back to that 24-hour time frame. They have to have something to whine about for 24 hours. Okay, so that's where all this opinion and spin and everything else, because if they spin it right, they're going to see a trend somewhere and they're going to, and maybe some other information pops out, but they don't do the dogged research and the work as a journalist. See, now I'm using journalist as a very loose term. There are no journalists, and I'm not a Sean Hannity. I do listen to him once in a while, and just to get an idea where he's at. But he made one statement that was so very true, and I sat back and I felt bad. I actually felt almost brokenhearted. Not that I was invested in the news machinery that much, but he said something, and it really, I guess, honed my senses. He said journalism's dead, and he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. Somebody like yourself now, who's got the video and got the facts and puts it out there, that's a journalist. What you're doing is honest to God journalism. What they teach these kids in school now, and I never went to a journalism class. I was a hillbilly that fell into this job, but I learned pretty quick that if you have the facts to back it up and the video to back it up, because once you have that, then the other people you could sit if you're sitting on that information and you're looking at it, and then you see everybody else. It's that game of telephone. You see everybody else doing it. Your immediate reaction is go, no, 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 no. That's not how it happened. But that never gets to the end product. Does it make sense?
Yeah, and that's how I would do it too. And it's just, if you have editorials, then you do them separately. And the news used to do
Correct.
that. Like you'd have time for that. There'd be a spot for that. Bill O'Reilly will certainly tell you what he believes. He doesn't
So
hold
yeah,
back.
and I like Bill O'Reilly. I mean, I liked him before he got his hand
I think
slapped.
that my problem with him was that he was kind of a bully to some of the people he was interviewing. But like, I will give him credit.
Yeah,
Before Jon Stewart was absolutely nuts, he brought him on his show.
yeah. Well, the
And he
one thing
treated him
determined.
fairly. I got to give him credit. Like, you
Well,
can't do
that's what
that
got me
now. That's for damn sure.
right.
I mean,
Exactly.
yeah,
And that's
that's
what
what's
got me
changed.
watching Fox was Bill O'Reilly
So,
because he
and
came out. He came out and just yeah, he said what he felt, and we knew it was an opinion show. I think the best one is when he had Barney Frank on, and
mhm.
he went through the whole history, and I've watched Barney Frank screw up the housing market for years, but I saw how he treated him, and I went, ooh, it was the same thing like with Trump. There were things that Trump said, and I went, oh, dude, come on, really? But it got the point across. It's like, wait a minute. But O'Reilly did the same thing, and Barney Frank was. And in fact, that was the first time I'd seen him. Bill O'Reilly's when he had Barney Frank on, and a couple of people told me, "Hey, you got to watch this guy. He's kind of like a mean Rush Limbaugh." And Rush Limbaugh, I took with a grain of salt, but there was a lot of truth in what he said. If he had the facts, you knew I could see it. I don't know if other people could, but I could get the feel of how like Limbaugh did it, how O'Reilly did it, and we've gone through this period of all these little puff pieces. Oh my God, it's a politician. Oh, a bunch of clapping seals, bunch of lemmings.
Right.
Well, look at the View. There's a good example. You know, they and they all. I'm just like, oh God, you got to be kidding me. They're not thinking for themselves, and I think that's
Right.
the thing that pisses me off the most. Is, I mean, I'll go with an idea until my spider says, and that's probably another issue, but the medication could probably straighten that out. But when my spider senses start tingling, there's something in your body, your soul, your humanity that says, wait a minute, and that's where people lose it. That's the younger generation, the poor purple-haired ones. They have no clue. They're not teaching them in school. They're not teaching them critical thinking. They're teaching them how to think as a monolith. They're teaching them how to think as a group. It's this hive mentality on both sides. So, but it's
Right.
more prevalent
And the
in the
conformity is just as rigid as a
right,
religion,
right.
man.
If you don't like
You're a
what they're saying on
blasphemer.
campus, you're out. Now,
Right.
that really gets my goat. I've never been a college guy. I never, I didn't have the smarts. Plus I get bored really easy, and I'd be asking lots of stupid questions like, "Why is it that way?" Well, it's that way. No, why is it that way? And I want to see the professor. I love people that are much more intelligent than I am. That are in that kind of that ether, that elitist ether, that have
Right.
money, that have schooling, that have this, that, and the next thing. And then I come at them from completely center field. They never see it coming. It's not left field. It's not right field. It's center field. And I'm going to go, beak. And I'm going to go, okay, why? Well, it's
So,
no, no. Why? Why? I'm like a 3-year-old. Why?
right.
Explain to me how you extrapolated to get to that answer, and I'll tell you if you're full of crap or not. And a
So,
lot of people do
Tam,
that.
well, go ahead and finish your point.
A lot of people do that. I mean, a lot of my clientele, they're retired. They start at like 65 and go to 85. They got money. And the ones that I couldn't ask for a better group of clientele. and they're constantly changing, right? So I get new people all the time. And the clientele that I see and I deal with, they've already been through the meat grinder, right? They made their money, they're sitting back, they're actually relaxing. And I'd say 99.9% of them are absolutely amazing. They're kind of like low key, you just kick back and we're good, right? They got more money than God. They got FU money. So as the as the tech for them, I come to them and go, okay, let me fix, your rolling nightmare here, your home, and that's what we're here. And I don't mind them over my shoulder. I'd rather teach somebody this is why it's doing this. This is why it's doing this. You got to push this button. Wait a second because it's stupid. Then it'll go to where you want it to do. And that's how I get them involved with what I'm doing, so they know when I'm done, they have a better understanding of the product they just spent $2.5 million on.
So
So
let me pause you here so I can bring up a
go
super
ahead.
chat from Tam. Do you have any juicy gossip about CNN news people? I mean, I know you've been out for a little while. Is there anybody currently working at CNN that you got gossip
Well,
on?
I don't know if those people are still alive. They always say if you survive, if you remember the '80s, you weren't there. They said that about the '60s too. But as far as the only gossip I got is Hollywood people. I mean, as far as who they are, because the first 2 years I was there, my job was to stand in a studio and have Bob Hope, uh, George Carlin, Stephanie Powers, Raquel Welch, all the kind of actors from the '60s and '70s. I'll think of their names. There's a whole slew of them. TV guys. One of my favorites was Sid Caesar and Bob Hope. And you're in a studio with these two people, with just you and them. The control room's on the other side. There's a wall, and the only way I can tell there's anybody breathing over there is I can hear them on the headset. So my job is to make them comfortable. I'd go out and get them tea because that's the way I was raised: tea, coffee, whatever they need, water. And so I was kind of like the concierge once they were in the studio. And the only ones I didn't see, because I was starstruck. I was like, I wanted to really like, wow, this is so cool. I've got Bob Hope sitting in front of me, or I've
Right.
got Sid Caesar, some of the old comedians, or Stephanie Power. She's drop dead gorgeous. Raquel Welch, one of my favorites. Um, and I just wanted to. I didn't go into it. I went into it kind of starstruck, but to see how they actually reacted one on one with another human, that's when I really got a charge. That's when I realized, ooh, these people are cool. They got money, and yeah, they're being nice right now. But if I put them on a half hour delay, that's when the control room was telling me, wait a minute, we got to push it back half hour, breaking news somewhere. And I'd lean around the camera and go, okay, guys, we got a half hour. What can I get you? And then you'd see the reaction. Are
So
they going to
basically, what
be,
you're getting
yeah,
at is just that you start to realize, okay, so yeah, they're a celebrity, but they're actually also a human being too.
right, exactly. And everybody has a bad day. I try not to judge anybody,
Right.
but I can tell, from 50 feet away, and you're coming at me, what kind of attitude you have. And so when these people got in the room, the only thing I saw was that elitist attitude. And it wasn't from a lot of them, but it was for people. Usually, it was television people trying to get to the movies. Does that make sense?
Sure.
They were actors on television. Stephanie Powers was one of the ones that just blew me away. Her and Ted Danza were supposed to come in and do this interview, and he was late. He was way late. He was like 45 minutes late. And in television, that's a lifetime. So that screws up the whole, dominoes that they're supposed to click down to this moment where you got two of them on screen. So Atlanta's flipping out. The newsroom's flipping out. The Hollywood guy, he's going nuts. And I'm sitting in the studio watching this woman melt down. And no matter what I did as a human, just a caring human, can I get her? Hell no. She went from zero to bitch in less than a second.
Oh
And I
wow.
was like, wow, okay, I understand. And I sat back a little bit, when things kind of calmed down a little bit, I thought, okay, maybe she's just having a bad day. That's just my nature. But I realized later, no, that's just the way she is. The other one was like Linda Ronstadt. She came in, and her team around her, her posse, as they say now, she came in to do an interview, and that was like at 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, which is noon in Atlanta, and we were going live. And they were stuffing so much coke up that poor girl's nose. I'm like, Jesus, no, I can't have this. And
Right.
they're looking at me like, nope, this is what we do. And I'm like, who am I? I'm just, I'm just an employee at this point.
Right.
I'm going, and then so immediately I went into the control room, shut the door because you came out the hallway. There was a green room, two doors, left and right. Right was the control room, left was the studio, and nobody was in the studio. I wouldn't let anybody in there other than my subject. And I didn't care how much their people screamed and yelled and jumped up and down and swore they were going to never talk to CNN again and blah blah blah. So, but anyway, so this is all going down. So I ran into the studio, shut the door into the control room, shut the door, and I looked at the producer. I go, "We got a problem." And she turned around and looked at me and said, "What?" And I said, "Look, come here." So I cracked the door, and everybody's just doing. And then this is the '80s, so everybody had coke. Hell, I had 2 vials in my pocket at the time. So they're, but they're just hammering this poor woman. And I'm like, okay, if she doesn't get off, I looked at the producer, little tiny gay gal, um, big round glasses, cute, and very very smart, but no street smarts. And I looked at her and I said, if they keep doing it, she's not going to make it through the broadcast. She's going to drop with a cardiac arrest right in front of me.
They definitely
And
don't
she
want
goes,
that live.
no, no, no. She goes, oh, that'd be bad for ratings. I just looked at her and went, and she kind of grinned. She goes, see if you can control that. I said, the only way I'm going to control that is I'm calling security and everybody's getting booted out of this green room. I don't give a shit who it is.
Right.
And we had this gal that was our security gal, and she came in there. She had a little tiny black woman, but boy, she was mean and feisty, and I wouldn't want to screw with her. And I towered over her by a couple of feet, and I'm like, okay. So I called her. I said, get in here, clean these clowns out, and when you're in that environment, you're kind of all working together. You don't
Right.
want disruptions because you're going live, and that's the worst thing. It can have dead air where you're going, hello, 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 can you hear me? Like the
Right.
AT&T
Right.
commercial. Or you got a blank screen with a bunch of fuzzies on it. That will just freak everybody out. But when you can semi-control the situation, so as this woman comes in, clears out the mess, and it took everything we had to keep this girl upright in the chair. And I thought to myself, wow, okay, that's just, if she doesn't get off this, she's going to be dead in a year. And if you look at that machine, like the media machine, the Hollywood machine, they will spit people out. That's what they do. And nobody realizes this. I don't think people get that concept. You always hear the story that the girl got off the bus and 6 months later she's hooking or she's stripping. She wants to be an actress. Nope, that
Right.
didn't work. But and the media is the same way. And they do it with information. They do it with their guests. They do it with the guy in the street. And one of the things, if I get back to that one question, if I had my own news organization, I'd want to do the follow ups for at least 6 months to a year, maybe
Right.
once every couple of weeks on whatever situation that was. Because, like I said, media is dead. So, what do you do? What do you do with that? And they're not teaching them in school. And until that, I don't know how that's going to happen. Maybe Elon's got an idea. But until you get the truth out there, and I still got a big question mark about what he's going to do with Twitter.
With Twitter.
But I
Yeah.
like the concept.
Yeah.
I like the concept because if it goes the way I hope it goes, the people that are caring, loving, good humans, they're going to stand up. And like you said earlier about the left wants the right to twitch, that's what they want us to do. Well, I'm center, but I'm still getting pulled to that side a little bit. That's what they want. They're pushing all this crap via the fake media, and that's platform after platform. Zuckerberg, Bezos, all those clowns. Bill Gates, he's another one. Um, they're the elitists. And when you can come in as a quote unquote information platform and throw your money at an election, I got a problem with that.
And that's actually a good point for how I want to segue into our next segment here because it's relevant to what he's saying here. Stephen N says, if you want to know who to listen to, find out who the MSM are demonizing and start there. You only start taking flack when you're right over the target. And that's so back in 2008, and this is something I try to voice. Well, actually, we can go further than that because like the thing that I want to point out is that how elections have changed because of the media. And the generation that has never known what the internet is doesn't understand. But like, you know, if we go back to the pre-internet, like let's talk about the 70s and all that, the media got to pick who got to go to debates. And if you didn't get on the debate stage, you didn't exist.
Exactly.
Yeah, everybody can run for president, but you're going to be on the ballot and nobody's going to have any idea who you are. The media used to have a total stranglehold on who makes it, you know. So like you go back to like, I don't know, let's say Dukakis versus Bush, you know, there wasn't a Dukakis for president.com, and you know, it was whatever, you know, and whoever Dukakis was with, and it was pretty much all the debates. And so for example, a lot of them, so we go on to 2008 when I was plugged in, you know, I worked for Senator Mike Gravel and they got in. So actually there was a really good doc that somebody did, and I forget the name of it. I think it was Orwell Rolls in His Grave. But anyway, they went over and they did a time lapse or time. It was basically like, you know, taking a video of a debate and then cutting it off when different candidates were done talking. And what they found in that moment was that out of like a 1 hour or 2 hour debate, Hillary Clinton was given about 45 minutes and Mike Gravel was given 5. You know, so and then like you go down the line of how long they're allowed to talk. And then frequently what you find is that, you know, that of course corresponds directly to who they favor, who ends up being who wins. And that's how you know, that year you ended up with the last 3 were Hillary versus Obama versus Edwards, right? You know, and so then they get rid of Mike Gravel. And why did they go after Mike Gravel? Well, one thing, Mike Gravel is anti-war. Another thing, Mike Gravel got up because Hillary Clinton was talking about being anti-war. And, you know, there's a quote, you can still find it. And I put it on my channel too, because unfortunately Mike passed away recently. And there's a moment he's like, well, this is fantasy land. We're talking about ending the war. And they just voted to go to war right today. He goes, there was a vote in the Senate today that would have allowed, you know, like George Bush, it's a fig leaf to let him to attack Iran. And then he goes down the line of everybody who voted for it. And then he says, and I'm ashamed of you, Hillary, for voting for it. And after he did that, she started to get kicked down, and then Obama started to take over. It was like a Tulsi Gabbard taking out a crowbar and hitting Kamala Harris on the knee moment, right? So, of course, they needed him out as fast as they could. And then who's next? Well, that would be Congressman Dennis Kucinich, who most people tend to forget about, but he's one of my favorites of all time. And his problem was that he kept saying, we need to impeach George Bush and Dick Cheney. Period. Is immediately because of what they did to lie to us to get us into Iraq. Like, you know, and so they needed him gone because he would not stop talking about it. He would bring it up literally every time they would let him speak. And it's funny because they went after him and said he didn't have any evidence to impeach them. So then, like, I actually sat once on C-SPAN and listened to it because he made them read the whole thing because he got every piece of evidence that you could ever want to impeach them. But anyway, they go down the line, and the first thing that Mike pointed out to me, because he actually wrote a book with a friend of his called The Kingmakers, and it was specifically about how the media picks our candidates. And, you know, one of the biggest lobbies is the military-industrial complex. And they don't like anybody who's anti-war. You know, and so then we talk about how, you know, Bernie Sanders gets screwed over. You know, there's still progress because a candidate like Bernie Sanders would not have made it. He would have been in that 5-minute category, you know, and people will say, well, that's just the corruption of the DNC. And I'm like, nah, let me tell you a story about a guy named Ron Paul, you know,
there you go.
Because he was a Republican and he did the same thing. He was anti-war, you know, and I remember the big moment was because they were still pushing the the 9/11 thing, and that's why we need to be in war. And so then Giuliani says, they're trying to attack us because we're free. And Ron Paul's like, no, they're not attacking us because we're free. They're attacking us because we've been bombing their country for the last 20 years.
Exactly.
And so for that, they attacked him as a 9/11 conspiracy theorist, of course, and they needed to go over him. And so the other point that I bring up to them is you talk about corruption. So later on in the debates, they tell him he can't come, and he's like, well, why? And they're like, well, we do it based on polling. He's like, well, that's interesting, because I poll higher than Rudy Giuliani literally everywhere, and you guys are still putting Giuliani on the stage. And a lot of people were surmising that they thought the ratings from Giuliani versus Hillary Clinton would have been huge. So you got 9/11 Giuliani, and then Hillary Clinton, wife of Bill Clinton, would have been good for ratings. So in addition to that fact, they don't want anybody anti-war. So like Tulsi Gabbard ceases to exist, basically. For one, she pointed out what they did wrong to Bernie. And for two, she was anti-war. She was so anti-war that even though she has a platform that's very similar to Bernie's, that even Ron Paul endorsed her, Gary Johnson endorsed her. These are all like libertarian Republicans endorsed her because they knew that her foreign policy was so important to the future. But of course, that's also why the media definitely doesn't want anybody like that getting a voice. Period.
Right.
They don't want anybody to talk openly about what's wrong with war. And it's basically Tulsi Gabbard took a hammer to heels up Harris and just ended her run. And she did, which is one of the reasons why the Kamala Harris thing drives me so crazy, because the woman didn't even get to the first damn primary, and she didn't even get a single electoral vote because she wasn't popular and she's not competent, and now she's the vice president. So
well, that just tells you the state of where we're at.
Right. So, but the question I wanted to say to you specifically is just about this. So, like, talk about the media's views on, well, which candidates are we allowed to help and which ones are we not? Like, because, for example, early Tucker Carlson, and this is before he was who he is now, was pro Ron Paul and was speaking positively about him, and then he abruptly stopped. And it led me to believe he was told not to. So but it's not just Tucker Carlson, but the media in general and their control over who we get to see in elections. If you could comment.
Right. Well, I'll go back to the Reagan years. I remember the attitude in the newsroom. The hard left was always kind of floating around. They were the Hollywood elitist, wanted to be elitist clique. And I remember when he was gaining, a lot of momentum, and he was going after Gorbachev, he was going after Russia. One thing about Reagan is he might not have been the sharpest tool in the shed, but he knew how to talk to people. And that's a scary fact. So did Hitler. I'm not comparing the two, but you follow my drift here. So Obama's in that same canoe. But as things go, I saw how that was the talk. I mean, everybody's, that Reagan, he's a moron. He's just an actor. And I'm just like, wow, okay. And what are you basing this on? That's where I'm looking at it from. I don't know much about Reagan other than he was the president of the Actors Guild, and he was our governor, and he did pretty good things for the state. So I knew a little about him. And then as his presidency progressed, I was kind of going, okay, well, he's not really running the show. He's really good in front of a camera. He does have a sense of humor. But Nancy, I'm telling you, that is one human you do not want to cross, especially when it came to her Ronnie. You don't go anywhere near him and besmirch him in any step of the way, or she will make you she'll Epstein your ass, and not feel bad about doing it. Because they both, I think, when you see people like that and the media reacts, it's like they reacted with Trump, which just tickled me to death. Because I saw how apoplectic the media got. Everybody, oh my God, he's a moron, he's dangerous, he's this, he's that. And I'm sitting there listening and going, how do you know? So he had the snatch comment, on the bus. And look what happened to the guy that interviewed him. He was blackballed for how long? Now he's starting to come back. So they kind of eat their own. And when the media gets a hold of something, a lot of people, it's like I said, they all go to the same cocktail parties. They all want to be the the in the cool group, in school. So that's how they think. It's like they never got out of high school or college, and they take that mindset and they take it into the media business, which is a big mistake. I think there's a few of them that filter out, but same thing. Like, they how they change their tune. And I go back to that video thing. If I've got the video, if I've got the facts, you can jump up and down 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years later and say, I never said that. Everybody's, can change their mind. But if you come out 5 years later from the video that you stood up on one side of this position and blah, 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 and then you go to 5 years later where you gotta wait a minute, but you don't explain, and I think this is what part of this is missing. When you do make that shift, you don't explain how, and you don't explain the meat grinding process to get to where you're at 5 years later. That
And I
makes
think
sense.
that, well, yeah, and I think that the big point for me is that they definitely get direction about who they're
Yes.
supposed to cover and who they're
Yep.
not, and who they're
That comes
supposed
from
to
the
make
elites.
look bad and who they're supposed to make look good. And people on the left and the right get this. Like my
Oh, yep.
closest to mainstream media YouTubers that I watch, and you'd probably like them. They're called it's called Breaking Points, and they have one Republican and one progressive Democrat. And they actually agree on a lot of things, but they also disagree on things. But they give a very unbiased, this is about the facts,
Yeah.
approach. And then they just grabbed Ryan Grimm and the other girl's name is Emily, I believe, but it's the same thing. And now they're adding that to the network. They're trying to make a network on YouTube. But my point is that this is Crystal Ball is the leftist, and she's like, Jesus, they're giving Biden such softball questions. They're
Hmm.
just like they're like basically carrying him through interviews. So like
Right.
this is your leftist talking about that. The way that network started was Crystal Ball got fired for MSNBC for talking bad about Hillary Clinton. And I don't remember what got Sagar out other than he wanted to leave. I know that he was a White House correspondent at one point, and they both met at some point and said, you know what, this media thing sucks. Like, what can
Right.
we do to do something better? And
Right.
now that's why I tell people if you really want coverage on a lot of the mainstream media stuff, which I don't reliably do, then things that you would get normal news about, like Ukraine and all that.
Hmm.
I still talk about it sometimes, but I got nailed for a week for one of my Ukraine things, so I just stay away from it now. The point is that they will get it. They do the diligent work. They care about the
Right.
truth coming out, and they care about not being ridiculous. And they both have opinions at the end. They're called their radars, and but that's the section where they're supposed to do that. and
Right.
and then they get to comment on each other because it's got fairness doctrine, because he's a
Yes.
Republican and she's a progressive Democrat. And I'm like, man, this is so refreshing, and I listen to them all the time. I don't usually pay for subscriptions for YouTubers, but I'm subscribed to them because you get all their content. But and then they brought on more people, and I hope that continues to grow. you know
That's what it
um
needs.
Right. And then the same thing through the election. Yeah, she's a Bernie supporter, but she also calls it straight about other people, and so my point is that, they'll talk to anybody and they do it in good faith. And there's just not enough of that. And the funny thing that they pointed out is that now there are YouTube news outlets that are getting more views than any of the mainstream media,
Yes.
and that means we're winning. But if
Yep.
that's going to continue to work, then the
Got to be honest.
consumers got to make sure they support those people.
Right. And they got to be honest. If you put good, honest content out there, and now I haven't seen them, but that definitely puts uh, a note in my mental file to maybe spend the money and watch them and maybe comment with them, throw some questions at them just to see where they're at. But if you're telling me that's the way their basis is, that's a good start. That's a
Right.
real good start. And if that can, like you said, the YouTube channels are getting more views than cable news. Well, hello, yeah. And now if
Well,
they can keep it honest,
take a guy like
and
Joe Rogan. They can't touch him. He gets millions more views.
right,
Like,
but see that goes back to that, that goes back to almost monetarily, because I'm getting all these bazillion views and I'm selling, this product, and the money's coming in, they're donating, whatever. Everybody's out to make money. So anytime when you start getting a personality, or Joe, I'm going to use Joe Rogan. If you're using, if that's who you are, really, then great, and stay that way. Don't let the the star bubble distort your view. And
right.
that's where 99% of the people that are on this thing. That's why it's refreshing to hear what you just said about those two. If you can be grounded enough as a human to to not let that distort your view, and you stay to your mission, you stay to keeping the facts, you can have your opinion at the end of the show. You got 15 minutes, you got 15 minutes, let it fly. Cool. Everybody, but make sure everybody knows it. And if they can keep that basically footprint, and get that to spread, I'd I'd be, just tickled to death. Then we might have this country might have a chance of surviving. Because as at the rate it's going, this is like McCarthyism on steroids.
Right.
And all the younger folks, they need to fall back and read what and watch the footage of how that sausage making process, there's the word I was looking for, actually affected people's lives. It's like canceling. And
Well,
they
yeah,
don't
and
get it.
it's
They won't go back that far. They don't teach them that in school. So it's up to the individual, the purple hairs, to fall back and go, wait a minute, let's
well,
watch
and
this.
that's why
And
we
go
need
ahead.
to recognize that censorship is just
Bad.
something humans can't be trusted with. Like that's
Exactly.
I often say to people, censorship is not just like a concept, it's a mentality. If you get to the point where you think, well, God, it's so much easier for me just to make sure nobody else hears this, and then you want to do it with everything. It's like when it came down to Trump getting kicked off Twitter, they said, well, it's okay because the government didn't do it, a private company did it. And if you really corner somebody like that, like, so do you want the government to censor Donald Trump? They'll admit it. They would
Well,
rather he
yeah,
was.
yeah, and that
That's the
attitude,
mentality. That they
right?
think, well,
That
okay, well, I want anybody I don't
not
like
good.
gone.
Not good.
So,
And so sorry I hurt, their feelings. Wham. Get up, grow a pair, get some fur on them, and then step out and see if you can survive. And I think that's the thing that ticks me off mostly about what's going on in the media today, and uh, the social media is they're making a group of people, youngsters, just all of it. When they booted him off, the first person I thought, you sneaky. Who the hell made you God? I don't care if you believe in God or don't. I believe in a supreme power, and if I want to go, I don't need to go to a church. I go out in the woods and I talk to them. If I get an answer back, I want to take up my medication. But if somebody comes off like that censorship, it makes them feel better. It makes their narrative go where they want it to. That's wrong. That is
they don't want to
absolutely
be challenged. They want to be just secure in
no.
their
Then they
beliefs.
cancel you.
Right, and that's
If I
actually something that I highlighted earlier that Logo said was that your views become part of your identity. So then therefore you have to defend it as if they're attacking you as a person.
You're right.
And we can't be wrong about anything because being wrong is something that you punish somebody for. You ruin their reputation over, you laugh at them. So we've been doing this for a while, so I want to go ahead and get a couple more of these in, and
Sure.
then we'll be done for the evening. So, but I'm putting this up as evidence for the people who say that I don't have any left-leaning people who watch my material. But Todd Fulton says, I think we need a public option for universities. I personally think education should be free in first world countries at this stage of civilization. profit motive in education isn't working out. Now, that's not relevant to the whole conversation, so I'm not going to get into it here. But let me say, Todd Fulton, I'm going to give you an ovation. Here's my clap. Because I agree with you wholeheartedly. And if I were you, Todd, if you haven't already, you should watch my video specifically about why I supported Bernie, because I go into what, public option education does for a country that has it. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. You guys have been with us now for a while. I'm going to look here through the chat, see if there's anybody else that's said anything that I really want to address. And so as far as like for you now that you're out of the media, what's it like for you, looking from outside in at the current state of things? Do you feel like this is a trajectory that you thought that it was going when you decided to leave? Or do you think it's even worse than you ever expected?
It's worse than I ever expected, but I kind of saw the trend. And,
right.
And that's one of the reasons I stepped away from it, is because I can't do that. I mean, it's not in my veins or my DNA to be deceptive. Even if it benefits me. In my business now, if I screw up, I'll be the first one to admit it. It might take me a while. Now, my wife will definitely argue that point because I'll look at her and she'll say one thing and I'll say another. And she's looking at it from a younger view and a different angle than I am. And sometimes it's real hard for me to follow that angle. I just go with gut instinct. But then if I sit there and percolate on it a bit, I go, hey, wait a minute, you were right. I'm wrong. And I think that's a part of the thing that's missing in society is admit you were wrong. Hey, sorry, man, I didn't mean to piss you off. It wasn't intentional, it wasn't personal. Here it is. But the media doesn't have, somebody said the phrase, but it's one of the reasons they want God out of society. And I'm not a religious person. But and religion can be just as bad as any other cult.
Right.
But, as a human, the way I look at things is I know there's a power greater than I am, greater than all other humans on the planet. I'm not going to put my faith in any human until I actually see it happen. As far as, are they going to be able to guide my soul, for lack of a better term? And so when I feel that I'm having a conflict within myself, I'll go out in the woods and I'll talk about it. Nobody's around. Squirrels think I'm nuts, but it gives
They're probably
me
trying
that,
to eat you then.
Right, exactly. Well, that's not Australia, where everything in Australia is trying
to kill you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But, so Sabrina Favoriti says Russell Brand. I watch him because he brings receipts. Yeah, I like Russell Brand a lot too.
Yeah, I do too.
And what's funny about Russell is he's also a leftist.
Yeah, but he's seen the light. He's seen the light on both sides.
Right. Well, and from what I understand, his personal views are kind of eventually like a low state, and that people should work together. So basically, he's a communist, but he believes in a decentralized. We should develop like communities where we govern ourselves the way that we want to, and then peacefully interact with each other. And I tend to agree with that. As like maybe an end game. If we get to a point where we decide that having a really powerful central government is not a good idea for any system.
No. You're looking at tribalism. See, there's such a fine line between that thought process as a community, as we're all self-policing. I get that. The Constitution was written for a reason. And I think part of the media thing that really ticks me off is they're trying to tell me that document isn't worth the paper it's written on.
Right.
And I'm like, wait a minute. Okay, that was one of the things I learned very young in school. I had a copy of the Constitution because it interested me. The words, the way these men thought 200 years before I ever dropped onto the planet made sense to a 7-year-old. And I kind of, if I had questions, I go, hey, I'd ask my parents, what's this mean? And them being who they weren't going to give me, a pipe dream. They told this is what they were going after. And as the older you get, you kind of go, you get other sources that say the same thing. It's like, okay, I get that. The community thing, the thing that really spooks me about these little separate communities, like Russell was talking about, decentralizing the government is to a point. Yes, we need people that, and everybody uses the phrase in power. No, stop. You're just blowing smoke up your own butt. It's the people that help guide the rest. This group says, hey, this, you might be a congressman, a senator, the president, and you have to, and that's what they don't do. And I know you got 350 million people in this country, and not everybody's going to think the same, but that's what they want. They want this group to think this way. They want this group to think this way, and screw the rest. You, as a leader, you have to be open. You have to be one grounded in your own humanity, which I don't think any of these people are grounded. I haven't seen one. Kelsey Gabbard is a close one. Um, the guy that's going to be the new, if everybody wins, the new Speaker of the House. I don't like him. He just the way they come across. They're just slimy. It bothers
Who
me. And
is that?
maybe that
I'm not familiar.
I
Who
can't
is
think of
that?
his name. He's on the Republican side. Let me ask my brilliant wife. Do you know who I'm talking about, honey? The one that's going to be, if the Republicans win, is going to be the Speaker of the House. Not Ken McCarthy. No. Anyway, it's that slimy used car salesman thing. Sorry, used cars, but so car salesman. You guys are making
Well,
bank now.
that's actually something else that I pointed out to Lynn Wood, and he agreed with, was that there's a what I call the give a shit factor. Like, I
Yes.
would vote for Ron Paul over Joe Biden because I believe Ron Paul genuinely gives a shit. And that if
Right.
people were hurt by his policies, he would do something to fix that. And I
Right.
have met people on the right who said that if they had to choose between, Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, they would pick Bernie Sanders because while they
Right.
don't agree with him, they acknowledge that he's a good person and that he
Right.
genuinely gives a shit.
Right.
The give a shit factor is unfortunately also a great way for the establishment not to like you because they
Right.
really like candidates they can control, which is how you end up with
Exactly.
these people like Ronald Reagan was literally mentally incompetent for like the final year of his presidency, and they just kind
Yep.
of propped him up and just did the same thing they're doing with Joe Biden now. Then they wanted John McCain to run, and I don't know what the hell happened to John McCain, but the John McCain in 2008 was like a total Manchurian candidate. He was a different guy. He looked really bad during debates. He
Right.
looked medicated, to be honest. He certainly wasn't. What I found funny is that John McCain is in some of the documentaries I used to share about the military industrial complex, talking about how
Right.
bad imperialism is. And then he's
Right.
all pro war all of a sudden because he literally just looked at Ron Paul and said, we've got to do something. That's how Hitler took power, buddy. And Ron Paul looked at him and shook his head with a goofy look on his face, and the crowd started laughing at John McCain. You know,
Right.
but they wanted to prop him up, and then you got Joe Biden. You got to know other people are running the country because he sure as hell ain't.
Yeah.
You know,
It's the money people. It's the elitists. Pelosi's in that. I'm going to use a Hillary Clinton thing because I honestly think they are deplorable because they are who they are. They're not. They're past. If if Nancy Pelosi was out of office for say 2 years, and I ran into her in her coffee shop, my first reaction would be, I want to know, was the last bazillion years a bunch of bullshit, or is she really a human? And I would know that before I ever open my mouth. Spider senses again. So you're right. It's the voter, the public is not picking the election, and I think that's one of the reasons I'm really digging when they say if you're going to be vote, one, you have to be a citizen. Period. End of discussion. Two, you have to have ID. Period. End of discussion. And so until they get that process, and it's going to take some brave souls to do it, but until they get that process rock solid, and it's not right now, You're right. The media from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s picked who was going to be the candidate, and that's wrong. Who are they? Are they God? No. They got money? Yeah, okay, fine. But they're not in the trenches busting their bump to put food on the table for their family.
And that certainly
I didn't
wasn't
pick
how
them.
the Constitution intended it. That's for damn sure.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly. That's why they want to get rid of the Constitution. They don't want anything to do with the Constitution. Oh no, that's bad. Bad juju. No.
so Stephen Roberts says, I used to work in post production television. Once you find out how the bread is made, it's a really easy choice to turn away from the whole industry.
Yep. He's absolutely right. I mean, I got to hang out with some really, really cool people behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And that was from Paramount, Sony, Fox, and CBS, ABC, CNN. They used to have these things called, uh, we used to have these theme parties down at a place in Hermosa Beach. And the way to get people to show up was you told one page at one TV show, game show, didn't matter. That whole network, I'm not kidding you, that whole lot, if they were under 40, would show up at your house. Hey, we're here to party. Here's the beer. Here's the pot. Here's the this. Here's the that. And that's the way it was. But he's right. I think a lot of people do it. One, it's not bad money, and two, they want to either be a star or they want power. And but a lot of people are just really good at their craft. And you talk about not everybody can do lighting. You got to know what the cinematographer wants so you can set up the lights. The cinematographer needs to know what your skills are so he can light it right so your shot looks good. The people in the editing bay, the sound guys, the grips, all those guys, they're absolutely amazing. There are some nuts in the group, but they're usually the stunt guys. But they, he's right. If he was in post production and you saw how people backstab and bit each other in the back, and I want to just wait. It's because they have the power, and you're a minion. Okay,
Right.
and he's right. He's absolutely right. The money might be good, the the location might be great. You're out in the middle of New Zealand for 8 months. Living out of a tent. Doing some kind of TV show we won't mention, but all that kind of stuff. A lot of people thrive on the craft, the art of it, and those people are pretty grounded. But then they also have to put up with the BS that's piled on top of them because they don't do it right. If this goes wrong or that goes wrong, or then they're just ostracized in front of everybody. Alec Baldwin, damn good example. There's a lot of directors, producers, um, people that actually get their name on the screen in big letters that push the other people around that actually make the sausage. They push them around like they're nothing. So how do you do something you absolutely love and go to work and get treated like crap every day?
Sounds like the best option would be to do what Crystal and Sagar did and start your own YouTube channel.
But then again, if you're talking about, well, that's what a lot of people did. I mean, there's all kinds of these little offshoots for props and studio cameras and lighting and cables, and there's all, when they say industry, it's huge. The end for all those different cogs come together to put something on TV. But I think that his point is, when you're sitting there in post production and you're doing things, if you can have a sense of humor about it, your job's going to go a whole lot easier. But he's right, because people come in and they just, because they have power and they're above you on the evolutionary food chain in that particular group, you're going to get your butt chewed. Not all people are really good bosses.
Well,
Everybody
that's
said,
for
"Oh,
damn sure.
I'd be a good boss. I'd be a good." But no, you have no business even being next to a phone, computer, nothing.
There's definitely a difference between being a boss and being bossy. So
Right.
the
So
president,
yeah, he's got a good point.
according to Logos 42, and this will be the last one for the evening, the president no longer runs the country. The companies, the lobbyists, and the cabinet runs it. And I'd say that's very accurate. But Gravel would point out that nobody that probably, and he didn't ever speak of the Bilderbergs, but you kind of get the feeling that your presidents or who the most likely candidates were already picked well before they even started. And the internet at least gives us the ability to be able to hear more from somebody after the time that the media has eliminated them. That's why, for example, Andrew Yang remained yet relevant because he became a podcaster and he's got a successful podcast. Tulsi Gabbard just started hers. And in our day, you stopped running for president, then you ended up going and getting a 9 to 5 because you don't exist anymore. Unless you are still in office, you could, if you're still in Congress or whatever. But I would say the unfortunate truth is that I would go even further back in history than now. And I've done videos in the past about the way that the founding fathers operated, that not all of them were actually very nice people.
No,
some of them were actually very big on the wealthy being in charge. And so some of the reason we're in the system that we're in is because they wanted to be able to protect the wealthy. But we can talk about that at another time, because as Liazel said, this has been a long interview. I went to the hardware store and made a word that I'll never pronounce right. But in any case, man, it's been great getting to know you, and if you like listening to and talking to me, I hope that you'll also start listening to my show and offering commentary, and it'd be good to hear you. And then what I plan to do eventually, which is something I used to do with my podcast a lot, was I would grab just a panel of people from different walks of life, sometimes relevant to the topic, sometimes not. And the objective would be to have a conversation about current events, in some way or another. Like one of them was great because like there was those protests going on in Egypt, and then there was an internet crackdown. Like they were going to limit internet in Turkey. So I brought on a panel. I literally had a girl from Saudi Arabia, a guy from Kuwait, a guy from, did I say Saudi Arabia? I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point is I also had somebody from Turkey, obviously, and I had somebody from Egypt. And we had this beautiful panel where we're all discussing the Middle East and its relationship with the internet. And I used to do stuff like that all the time. In some cases, this would be a situation, where, we would bring on people also from the audience. And I don't have a problem with that. Just, the only problem is when you can't vet somebody. You're like, well, I hope this doesn't go bad. Like you don't get a troll or something. I had a guy once come on my podcast because I was using Blog Talk, and that has a call-in line. And he literally just played a recording of the N-word over and over again, trying to get me kicked off the air.
Well, that's low intelligence score.
So, so for example, Mads Lidstream says V Radio live streams are really messing up my European sleep schedule. And that was what I'd have to do too, because sometimes I'd be interviewing people from Europe. And at the time it was because of Skype. Skype enabled us to podcast with people all over the world because I could connect to somebody anywhere with phone quality, and Jesus, was it helpful. I never could have done that panel at that time. Well, StreamYard, it's the same thing. I can send a StreamYard link to anyone. So, but any case, that's what I'm looking forward to going forward. Tomorrow, I'm theoretically supposed to have a debate with a guy from the Zeitgeist movement. I used to be part of that. It's kind of died down now, and he's upset that I don't hammer on the right enough. And he commented on one of my videos that science actually shows that the approach to activism that is currently being taken of being anti-white, anti-male, anti-straight, anti-Christian, all of this stuff does is literally create a chain reaction where those people then turn around and start doing the same thing to what they perceive to be the opposite. It literally creates more racism, sexism, bigotry. And, competent activists already knew this. The social science says this. And that's what my show was about, was I went down the different scientific articles. And ironically, what they found was the studies were mostly being done to try to figure out how people become right-wing fascists. But what they discovered was that it wasn't exclusive to the right, that this happens to the left too. That basically has everybody has a button on their forehead. And if you click it, then people become extremists because they're naturally thinking that they're reacting to a threat to their in-group. and that the strategy that we used to have, which was we are all one species, we are all one people, we are all one country, even if we disagree about things, that strategy was bringing people together, and that this new strategy that is supposedly to fight racism and sexism and all that is actually causing the opposite effect.
Correct.
And I think that what I run into usually when I'm debating people that are like that, especially the ones who are really obsessed with the social justice warrior crap, is that no matter how much truth you show them, they really want to believe that what they're doing is the best possible thing. And it brings me to you ever see that John Cleese clip where he's talking about extremism, and what the advantages of extremism are?
Yes.
And
he's right.
Yeah, it's like you're doing it because
way.
it makes you feel good. You get to feel like you're righteous because you were a shithead to someone. And that was before the internet. The internet makes what he was talking about 1,000 times worse. Because now you can just sit on Twitter and be an asshole to people for hours and pretend like you did something noble by doing it. So
yeah, exactly. You're exactly right. I mean, it's the same. The premise you just laid out is a perfect palette of the crap that's going on now. It's just like I said. It started out, years ago with the McCarthy, and before that, now it's McCarthyism on steroids. Because they want you to be monolithic. They want you to, I'm right, and they actually believe this stuff. And that's the thing that gets me is critical thinking has gone completely out the window.
Right. And that's what I told him. I'm like, I'm emphasizing on critical thinking, and unfortunately the left is not always doing critical thinking. And he's like, well, what about the right? I'm like, yeah, but I'm supposed to be trying to police my own side when they're being idiots. Like, the reality is that they won't do that. Like I mentioned earlier about violence, and activism. They don't police their own on that. They say, well, I don't support that. I'm like, okay, well, that's great. So when are you going to join me in telling those people to fucking stop? When is that going to happen? Oh, it doesn't. So in any case, thank you very much for coming on, man. I will talk to you briefly off the air here when we're done. I just want to do my outro, so to speak. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Don't forget to go to hy.page/bradio if you've not already. Subscribe to me on Rumble, BitChute, Odyssey. You can also on Facebook, I broadcast to there. Sometimes I have viewers, sometimes I don't. You can also join my Fans of V Radio Facebook page where I post a lot of links to things that I'm researching. If you join my Discord, you don't have to voice chat. We actually don't voice chat very much on my Discord. It's just kind of a chat room, really. But you will see, not only will you see lively debates, like, for example, people talking to me about why I voted for Bernie. I imagine that'll come up, right? But they're constructive. The main rule is no personal attack. Just don't start attacking each other. If you can handle that and debate like an adult, you're all by all means welcome, even if you happen to be under 18. I'm just like, just don't act like a dick. And what I've found is that I'm trying to create a culture here that if you see the artwork, yes, I have my own beliefs, but I want to get rid of this notion that I have to either be a jackass or a Dumbo. I'd really prefer to be a person. And that's why you have a person like me who's, for example, heavily pro-gun rights. Okay. But I'm also pro-healthcare. There's nowhere in the system for people like that to exist. And that's because the left and right paradigm has gone from being a descriptor to being a straitjacket, to being a cult or a tribe that you join. And that's what I'm trying to get rid of. If you're an honest person, we may not agree on everything, but you can still be part of my tribe. Thanks for tuning into V Radio, everybody.